Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Living Fast podcast. I am super excited to be joined by one of my personal friends, and a lot of you guys know him very, very well. What I want to do for this podcast is actually have more of a conversational style. Jake's very familiar with how we do it at Living Fast. I also want to mention that this podcast is presented by Locked In, the ultimate competitive edge for high performers. So if you guys want to learn more, go to getlockedin.com and you can be locked in like everyone who comes on this podcast. So I don't want to waste anyone's time. Jake's very familiar how we do it at Living Fast. He's been here before. He's a seasoned vet, so to speak, and he's one of the fan favorites, to be honest with you. And that's why we have to have him back on this podcast. So how I want to start it off is how we do it at Living Fast. You're very familiar. It's all about making people feel comfortable so they can share the most value. I did say this would be more conversational style, but if you were to come on here and really just, hit the ground running for this podcast, you're on it again, where would you want to start off, Jake?
For sure. Well, you said a seasoned vet. I have a grand total of 2 podcast episodes under my belt. So definitely a vet. Not exactly. But you know what, man? I'm excited to be here. I'm stoked to be able to co-host this with you. I'll be honest. I'm excited to be able to do this for me. Obviously, the thing that gets me jazzed the most about the show is having awesome guests on, right? I know that's where any folks listening are going to get the most value. But with that said, it has been year and a half since we first chatted there.
It's been a bit.
Yeah, episode 1 of Living Fast, which is crazy. It's been that long, but obviously it's been a lot of time, a lot of kind of neat stuff, and definitely some not so good stuff has happened in the interim. And I think it's a fun chance just to be able to catch up a little bit, and also to be able to chat a little bit about why I'm stoked to be co-hosting this show with you, man.
Awesome. Yeah, 100%. Well, I think what you said is really good, because I remember when we were on the last podcast, a quote that you said that really, really hit home with me was the most value is often people's stories. And you bring up guests, and you bring up, how important guests are. Well, in terms of, guest value and the most value in people's stories, what makes you believe that? What's the thing that kind of made you believe that the most value is actually just getting personal stories out of people?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think we live in such a world where it's so tech heavy, and it seems like every person you talk to is putting content out there and all this kind of stuff, and it's great. But it's like everywhere you look, it's teaching, it's coaching, it's education, it's knowledge. I'm happy that we have access to that, but I don't know. I've always found that the realest shit is just when people share their stories. That's what actually you can connect with. And I don't know, I'm just thinking in terms of even relating to business. It can be hard to relate, to somebody who's doing, big things and they're well down the path, and you're way at the very start. Do you know what I mean? 100%. But when they share stories, and I don't know, whatever it's about, maybe it's about, the origin story, but I think especially not just about wins, but also about times where they've fucked up.
Yeah.
And times where they failed. And it's weird because I don't know, maybe it's like a pride thing or it's an ego thing, but people don't love talking about that stuff, even though that's what makes people, I think, like folks. Do you know what I mean? You got to be cool with sharing stuff where you failed, and I don't know. So that's my take on stories, and I hope we get into that a little bit today.
I think the best way to follow that up is you mentioned how it's been a year and a half since you've been on this podcast. A lot has happened, and you believe that the most value is in people's stories. So I guess, I got to ask you, what is one of the craziest stories? I know you did a lot in the past year and a half. I know you jumped out of a plane in X place. I'm not going to name where it is, but I know you went to a place that...
A working plane too.
Yeah, crazy. And I know you've been, traveling around a lot over the past year and a half. Do you have any crazy stories about that? Because I know, you've done a lot. Where do you want to take that? Because I would definitely want to hear some crazy stories after, it's been so long.
Yeah, I've got one or two. I mean, we've gone on some pretty wild trips since we spoke, but it's so funny, man. I've noticed I'm racking up quite the list of places on my passport, which is pretty funny. So we I don't know, folks maybe know this, but I got married in Israel. This was back in 2020. Sorry, babe. 2021, I think. 2022. Sorry, 2022. And it's funny because no one in the family's from there. It just, my wife is obviously Russian, and there's some trickiness with getting visas to be able to go to generally anywhere on planet Earth, except for like 5 places. So that just kind of is how it turned out. But so I went there, and I won't get into maybe this story today. I can't remember. We might have even talked about this, but I accidentally went to Palestine on that trip as well, completely by accident. That was a pretty wild situation. And then shortly after we filmed the podcast, I went to visit my wife's family in Russia. So it's funny. I'm racking up quite the list of, I don't know what word you want to use. Controversial places on my passport.
You know what I mean? Bucket list things.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost, yeah.
But it's just funny. It's just kind of the way it turned out. But yeah, dude. And then obviously, like you said, went this past winter break to Dubai, which was crazy. I know you've been there. I know you've had some pretty wild stuff going on there. But I did, in fact, on that trip, go skydiving for the first time, which was pretty mental.
So that's awesome. Like, I think skydiving, personally, I've never done it. I know I've told you privately that.
Would you do it?
Well, it's one of my biggest fears. And it's that for that reason, it's on my bucket list. But, it's something that I definitely have to do. But it's something that I know a lot of people that have done, and they usually have a story attached to it. They usually have, like some people say it was easy. Some people say they didn't feel fearful. So, jumping out of a plane in Dubai, if that's not living fast, I don't know what is. So I think tell us about it. Like how was that? And
what was that like?
What did you get from that?
Yeah, dude, that was a pretty crazy experience. So for context, like, Anastasia, my wife Anastasia has for years been like, babe, I want to go skydiving. And I've always kind of shut it down a little bit. Just been like, no, we're not doing that. I don't know. There's fears about like, what if something happens?
Of course,
and all this kind of stuff.
I'm on your side with that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so but this time we're going, we're getting the trip kind of we're putting the finishing touches on all the bookings and stuff like that. And this is maybe in like, I don't know, like September maybe of 2024. And she's like, babe, I want to go skydiving on this trip. And same thing. I was like, no, like just, babe, we'll do lots of cool stuff, but forget that. And she was like, no, I'm going to go skydiving. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, you're really going to do that? And she's like, yep. And you can't stop me. So then I was like, all right, well, kind of my pride kicked in, and I was like, okay, well, there's no way that when we get back from that trip that I'm going to be at like a party or with friends. And it's like, hey, how was Dubai? Oh, you went skydiving. What was that like? And I'm like, actually, I didn't go. There's no way. So I literally did this out of pride. But yeah, for context, like I am super afraid of heights. Like it's for sure one of my greatest fears, which is weird because I've done some like pretty crazy stuff when it comes to heights. Like I've done 21 meter cliff jump and different stuff like that. But I think what it is like, if I know I'm supposed to be here, then I'm like a little bit more okay with it. But like if it's like a building, like a balcony or something, I literally am getting sweaty even talking about it right now. Like it's crazy. So yeah, it was a big fear zone push for sure. And it was weird. Like, you'd think that it was, were you nervous like right in the moment? So where it started for me was about a week before we were going on the trip. I literally just remember like going to sleep one night, and Anastasia was already sleeping, I think. And I just literally like laid down and just had this sudden thought. And I was like, holy shit, like in 1 week, you're jumping out of a plane.
Surreal.
And I don't know, it was this weird thing where it's like that. I don't know why 1 week out, why not a month out, why not a few days out, but like it was about a week out. I just started thinking about it. And then the thoughts started to spiral a little bit for sure. And, before you know it, a couple of days later, I'm looking up like, what's the odds of like both parachutes not opening and
down the rabbit
and all this kind of stuff, which it turns out is extremely low. I think they said like you're literally more likely to get in a car accident on the way to the skydive than both parachutes not opening. But it's just those thoughts, right? I think like when I look at it now, it's one of those things where I just don't love like the idea of not being in control.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it is. Like, it's just a thing that I've always had. And I feel like we might've even talked about this last time.
Yep.
I don't know, like put me in a scary situation where like I can somewhat dictate the outcome. That's just less scary to me than situations where like it's just not up to you at all.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you do. Like, you're not going to change the outcome. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just a bit spooky to me, but, so I'm kind of grappling with those thoughts. And I'm not going to lie, like there were definitely a few times where I got pretty close to like thinking about pulling the plug. But again, I couldn't, because every time I would start to like broach this, Anastasia would be like, yeah, you don't have to go. It's
and
okay.
The pride thing.
Yeah. And I'd be like, well, hold on. No. Okay. Like, if you're still going to go, like, there's no way. So yeah, pretty much we get to Dubai, and it's actually a direct flight from here, which is a thing that Air Canada is doing now.
Wow.
So it was like a 16 and a half hour flight. Is that what you did?
No, I did. I did 2 flights.
You had a
It was
stopover?
more like the day before I had to book my flight. I think I left like, you're going to Dubai. Okay, 2 days later, I'm on a flight. So I didn't get like the one way. I had to take like 3 different flights. I ended up in Germany, and it was crazy. But yeah.
So it's like, 16-hour flight, and we pretty much got to the hotel, went to sleep, and then woke up, and it was happening that day at like 2 p.m. So yeah, dude, we went there, and the car ride was probably like the hardest point for me, because now it's just like, in any like, whether it's athletics, like competition, it's always the like
the build up.
It's the build up, right? It's like the time before.
Yeah.
So that was definitely like a pretty big mental battle. But we got there, and I remember one of the first things I asked, this place called Skydive Dubai, which, like, big shout out to these guys. If anybody's ever going to Dubai and wants to skydive, hit them up, because it's a super legit operation. The production quality, if you choose to get the camera guys to go with you, is like insane. But I remember I was like asked the check-in desk, I was like, how many jumps have you guys done today? She was like, oh, we're coming up on 300 like today. And I was like, oh, okay.
Playing the odds.
Yeah, like we're going to be, maybe. But I'm like, we're going to be totally fine. And then they make you wait a little bit, waited probably for about an hour. And then we got kitted up, and I got paired up with this guy named Choi. And Choi was like former South Korean military. And one of the first things I asked him was like, how many jumps do you have? And he was like, I just passed 7,000.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to be totally fine. That's actually...
This guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah, that's funny enough when my nerves like almost completely went away, because I was like,
That's surprising to me.
Yeah, it was weird, but it just was like this sudden thing of like, yeah, this guy's done this already 10 times today. 7,000 jumps. Like, it's just, there's no way anything goes wrong. But yeah, we went up there, and weirdly enough, like even in the plane, I actually felt pretty good. The only thing is, right when we jumped, they kind of do this thing where he grabs the handles and does like a sort of a pump fake.
Oh,
and then
I
goes
thought you were
back,
gonna say pretend to throw you off.
and then flings himself out. And I just knew, like, if I'm looking down, probably I'm gonna freak a little bit. So the only thing I do is I kind of was just looking
I'm still
up
in the plane.
yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden you're just falling. But yeah, dude, crazy experience. I'm pretty psyched.
Crazy experience, especially in Dubai. That's insane.
We did it over the Palm.
Crazy,
which was pretty wild. Like, again, I know you've seen some of the footage, but yeah, man, if there was ever a place to do it, I'm pretty happy it was there. And I would say, for anybody that like, thinks about doing it, but maybe has the same thing as us, like they hate heights and all that kind of stuff, it is actually a really cool exercise in just like will. Do you know what I mean? Just like get yourself there and conquer it. You don't really have to worry about anything else other than showing up.
It's almost like getting in a cold shower and like for like times infinity. It's like, okay, I really don't want to get in this cold shower. I haven't jumped out of a plane, so I don't know how else to, I guess, gauge it, but it's almost like cold shower times 1,000. Like everything in your body saying don't do it, and you do it anyway.
There was I will share something hilarious in the plane. So, the guys that work there that are professional jumpers, they're so comfortable in this environment, and they've done this like obviously thousands of times, right? And I do think it's a certain personality who like chooses that as a profession. They're funny guys, right? Like these guys are jokes, but up in the plane, we each had our guy that we were jumping tandem with, and then we also had the camera guy. So there was like a bunch of guys, like for the two of us, and there were other jumpers in the plane too, but there was a lot more like staff than there were actual jumpers. And, you know, they're like chatting back and forth and doing all this funny stuff. And I remember one of the guys goes, "So whose idea was this?" And I'm like, it was my wife Anastasia's. And he looks right over at her and goes, "Oh, trying to get rid of this guy, hey?" And they all fist bump each other. And yeah, I was like, okay, fuck boys. That's some dark ass humor for this moment right now. So that got the heart beating a little bit, but it was pretty funny.
That's hilarious. Well, yeah, I definitely think that's something that once in a lifetime, you know?
No doubt. Yeah.
Just face your fears. How are you feeling afterwards? Are you a avid
an adrenaline
jumper
junkie
now? Adrenaline junkie? How are you feeling?
I would do it again. I think the thing I'd be more excited about now is doing it with someone who hasn't done it.
So me.
So you, i.e., we're going. Yeah. No, that's what is exciting to me. So yeah, I would do it again. I do think I would want to like, again, pick the location. I don't really have much of an interest in like doing it just cause.
Yeah.
But if it was like another, you know, dope spot and a really cool location, yeah,
almost like an experience.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Not just like I want an adrenaline rush. It's like I want to actually, you know, get something more from it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think so.
100%. Well, as I said before, if that's not living fast, I don't know what is. And one thing that Jake didn't have on his initial episode was a trailer. So stay tuned for that audience, because you guys are going to be able to get up close and personal with this skydive, and it's going to be pretty great. But yeah, like that is something that obviously, you know, I haven't done, but my brothers have done. Mm-hmm. Now you've done. Everyone in my circle seems to.
We're never going to let you live it down if you don't do it.
Yeah, like I kind of have to do it. You know, you know when everyone in your circle just like is doing something, and you know you should do it because you should face that fear. And then when everyone else starts doing it, you're like, okay, I just got to man up and do it. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now. So if you guys see us jumping out of a plane in the next couple months, don't be surprised. But you know, I think that it's important to you know, focus on also, like, you know, you went to Russia, you went to Dubai, you travel a lot, but mainly you talked about there was some ups and downs. And I you know, remember you telling me briefly about a herniated disc.
Oh yeah, dude.
Working through that. And I know a lot of people, you know, they go through injuries and sometimes they can never come back from it. How was that for you? And how did you deal with, you know, going through that time of trials and tribulations? Because like I said, with every up, like jumping out of a plane in Dubai, there's a down, like, you know, for example, a herniated disc. So how did you handle that?
No doubt. And shout out to
how did you jump on a plane with a herniated? No.
Yeah, no, I was feeling okay at that point, but shout out to Locked in Recovery. I'm looking at it right now. Anyone dealing with injuries, but
let's go.
But yeah, dude. So when I came on the podcast last time, obviously as a guest, not as a host, that injury had already happened, but yeah, I mean, anybody who's ever had a low back injury will know that it's a really like wild injury, just because it's, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just because of, you know, how many nerves are in the area, or like just whatever it is, but it doesn't seem to heal as quick. And also there's this crazy period where like you really have to desensitize to be able to do anything. Wow. So it's been a crazy journey for me. Like it kind of led me down a really crazy like health rabbit hole, and we'll chat about that in a little bit. But you know, when I got the injury, which I got, funny enough, during boxing, I'm sure that probably it was from, you know, 15 years of high performance tennis, just all the rotation, you know, the wear and tear, you know, not staying diligent with my mobility and, you know, strengthening the back. It's so funny how, you know, bros will love going to the gym and like hitting back day, but they never work out their low back. Yeah. And they love hitting like the lats and the traps and all this shit. But like your low back's pretty damn important. But yeah, that injury, like it was a weird thing, first of all, because I'm young. And so it's this weird stigma of like, you know, back pain. What the heck? Like you're a young man, like how that doesn't make any sense. But it's like, that doesn't help though, man. Cause like the pain is there all the same.
Yeah.
But it did it is sort of the catalyst of why I got so into health and, biohacking to a degree and supplementation, all these things, is because I just the whole process of like trying to heal that injury and realizing that, like, again, no disrespect to like anybody who's a doctor or a physiotherapist or a chiropractor, like they're obviously necessary professions, but like they didn't know shit about how to fix a low back injury. Like nothing.
Crazy, because how many people deal with things like that?
Yeah, I think it's like 2/3 of all people in North America at some point in their life will report like some type of non-specific back pain. Like it's crazy. So it's super prevalent, right? But yeah, man, I just remember going and getting prescribed these little rinky-dinky drills, and like I remember going to the hospital and they gave me this painkiller called Dilaudid. I can't remember what its chemical name is, but it's like essentially
doesn't sound natural.
It's like stronger than Oxy, which was so funny that in that moment that's not even what I needed. What I needed was a muscle relaxant.
Yeah.
That's because, when you do anything with your nerves, your muscles just go crazy and they all like tense up. That's where the pain comes from. So yeah, I remember he wrote me this prescription for this like ultra strong, opioid in like 1 second. It was like, yeah, just take these, like just be careful. They're like, can be a little bit addictive. And yeah, it's just, I won't get into that whole thing about like the medical system. Like, again, I'm grateful for doctors. My dad's literally in hospital right now. Like he's got some heart stuff going on. So I know they do a great job, but there are just some things. There's a reason why, the era we live in is referred to as medicine 2.0. It's just extremely reactive.
100%.
It's just the methodology is something happens and you treat the symptoms, right? Yeah. But it's very rare that you actually see medical professionals talking about treating, underlying causes, lifestyle factors. And so that's kind of what it was with my back, right? But
there's no money to be made if they solve your problem.
That's true. And even though in Canada, healthcare is not obviously a big business in the way it is in, for example, like the US, but it's still no question about it. There's not really, I think, any incentive to get to the root of things. It's really more so just if you come in with something going on, it's like, okay, let's get you out of pain and then get out of here.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that was my experience. And and then I started going to physio. And again, that just didn't help at all. And then, you get to this place. And again, anybody who's ever had like an injury that has lingered and become like chronic to an extent will get it. But it's kind of this weird, like hopeless place almost where you're like, I feel like I've talked to like all the professionals and I have no answers and I'm still hurting. Yeah. Like I still can't do what I want to do. So
especially as being young too.
And being young and obviously coming from a sports background, and it's rough, frankly, to not be able to like, your boys hit you up and it's like, hey, we're playing a game of some drop in soccer or like whatever. Hey, do you want to go, you want to go play tennis? You want to go, kite surfing? And you got to be like, fuck, I can't. So that sucked. That sucked. Yeah. But that's also kind of what led me into this whole realm, which has kind of been my last year, especially. And I know you're big into this kind of thing of,
100%.
I realized that it is super important that people take control of their own health. You got to take responsibility for your own health. And I think, not necessarily that it's people's faults, because I think a lot of the message you hear is that if you have health issues, that there's going to be someone that can help you. But I just realized at the end of the day, like if you really want to long-term be healthy, you do actually have to take it on yourself to learn some shit.
Yeah.
You got to learn about what actual health is. You got to learn about the body. And that was kind of my journey of trying to learn about the back specifically and how I could fix that. And the craziest thing is that it ended up being completely counter to like a lot of stuff you hear, which is like, you probably heard you hurt your back. Well, careful of rounding your back and, don't bend over anymore. And you got to move around like a robot now. But, funny enough, the thing that essentially fixed me, that like got me out of pain, got me back to like functionality, and then got me back ultimately into doing actual athletic stuff was working the back.
Yeah.
Which like, physios and doctors would be like, whoa, no, don't want to do that. No, man, it was literally jumping on the back extension and starting to get blood flow back, build strength, and actually start to build trust in the brain again that, no, dude, your back is not, you're not going to seize up if you bend over. Like it's almost as much of a nervous system thing as it is a muscular thing. You have to build, you got to build that trust that like, I can put myself in these positions. I can put this strain and we're okay. Like the body's meant to adapt.
100%.
That's the whole basis of strength training. And so it was a long road, but I'm happy with where I'm at now. But it led to a whole bunch of other health rabbit holes. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember that, Jake, he's definitely, I often tell everyone, this guy's known for his coffee spots. Like anytime you need a good coffee spot around Vancouver, this guy knows a spot that's just like, you go there and you're like, whoa, this is like a gem in the city. And out of nowhere, I'm looking to go for a coffee chat with this guy, and I text him, and he just texts me like, I think it was the day before we were supposed to go, and he's like, do you like farmers markets? And I'm just like, I love those. Like that's my thing. Like I love stuff like that. And instantly, like, I'm just like, yeah, usually it's, we're going to coffee houses. Now it's like, we're going to the farmer's market. I went to the farmer's market with him, and he's just, like I said, like he was so like passionate about taking on this health thing. And I think what you said is true. It's almost like going through it and realizing you can't do those things that you love, and almost like going back to what you said earlier about the power aspects, and you don't kind of have that ability to take control yourself because you're limited by this back. And some people, obviously I hope no one goes through anything bad, but sometimes that's what gets you to learn about the health and wellness, and actually push you to be a farmer's market junkie. And those are things that are very, very positive. And one thing, like you say, you went through a biohacking rabbit hole, and I know you ended up changing your diet, but like, what are some things that you found to be useful, or you like were big aha moments when you went down that rabbit hole?
Yeah. I mean, so I think a lot of this, obviously, like I said, the back issue didn't actually start it. I had some other family stuff happen, which, was tough, but the back was kind of the second thing, which kind of started it. But I just, I don't know why I started to get fascinated with just starting to, I guess, realize that like, we are more, technologically and medically and all these things advanced than ever before. And yet humans are sicker than ever before.
You know what's crazy about that?
Yeah.
I'm very confident saying this stat on the podcast because I've seen it so many times. But if I misquote it, by all means, go fact check it yourself. But it's interesting because I'm a business guy, and you look at like industries, and you look at things that make sense in like the healthcare industry that's so heavily funded. And they're so like, there's such a big part of, the US specifically, but in the US, actually medical error is the third leading cause of death in America, which nuts. Is in any other industry. Like think your industry is meant to like help you not die essentially, or feel better. Right. And if your industry on the contrary is the third leading cause of like death in America, that's a bad business model.
Raises questions.
And I want to throw that stat out there because it really, I guess throws some more validity to what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example. And it became very interesting to me and very evident that I've lost family members to cancer. I've lost family members to heart disease. That does happen to be the leading cause of death, number 1 and 2. Heart disease is number 1, cancer is number 2. And diabetes is right up there and stuff as well. But it just became weird to me that like, how come if we're so advanced and all this shit is so locked in, clearly not in the right way, that this is happening so much. And then that led down other rabbit holes where I just, if you had said to Jake in 2020 or 2021, like probably actually around when COVID started, like if you'd said to me then that, Jake, are you aware, like, do you realize that health really, and people getting sick, like really is a business? I would have been like, no, dude, that's like very conspiratorial. Like that's just some bullshit. Like there's no way. And I don't think that now at all. Like I really do believe that that's true.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to, throw names like company names out there or any kind of stuff like that. But the reality is like there are a lot of people that profit and benefit from people doing shit that is really bad for your long-term health.
Follow the money.
Yeah. And it just, that became very interesting to me. And so, and it was even learning other things like, when I came to understand that, and again, I feel like if it sounds like I'm bashing doctors, I'm fully not, but it's just the reality of like, how the education system works is like, I can't remember where I heard this, but it was something like, and this was in the US as well, to be fair, but, the doctors go through, I want to say it was like 4 or 6 hours of nutrition training across their whole medical degree.
Same thing.
It was like something like that. And
it's not a lot.
It's the point. And again, yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's the exact number, but the point is it's very little. It's like far less than 1% of their entire curriculum. Yeah. And it's like,
and it's so important.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that was wild to me. It's even, being in, going and visiting my dad in hospital the last couple nights. He's been there since Friday. He's waiting for an operation that he's going to have tomorrow. But it's like, even looking at the food they give him, I'm
Crazy.
like, what the fuck is this? Like there's all kinds of like garbage in here, man. And it's just, yeah, that became interesting. So yeah, it kind of led me into this rabbit hole of like, okay, well, clearly the message when it comes to things like nutrition, when it comes to things like, even the kinds of products that you use on a daily basis, like, and things that are healthy versus not healthy that, that kind of society would love for you to feel is true. I started to just become very skeptical. I think that's the big thing.
Sure, common sense.
Yeah. I just became skeptical, and it's not that I'm by no means any kind of, conspiracy theorist, but I just became skeptical, which I think was healthy. And I just started to sort of not take things at face value, to start to ask questions. And I don't know, those questions pretty quickly led me to some understandings, like even around, things like toxins. And it's something that probably the average person, like when you say toxins, like what are you talking about? The fact that like even in the, the products that we use on a daily basis, that you're exposed to like well over 100 either toxic or carcinogenic substances every day. Shit in your drinking water, in the products you use at home, in your cleaners, like all kinds of shit. And I'm like, you combine that with the food we're eating and there's other lifestyle things as well, probably that are, to be honest, like more emotional. Just like there's people that are lonelier than ever. And it's like, yeah, it started to make sense why we're sicker than ever.
Yeah.
So, for me, I wanted to start to understand like, okay, well, what do I have control over? Because you don't have control over everything. The reality is if you're going to live in, especially in a city, there's just shit you got to understand that you're going to be exposed to, which is not good for you. That's just life, right? Unless you live like out on a farm and it's all natural. That's great. But most of us aren't that. But what do I have control over, right? What products can I use that are, not toxic, right? And I know you've kind of been on that same wavelength.
100%. And, I think what it takes to, figure that out, everyone kind of goes through their own journey. And I think when it comes down to, getting away from toxins, it's interesting you bring up toxins because, toxins, like you said, are everywhere. It's almost so hard to get away. Where do you draw that line? Because obviously we're going to be exposed to that. We're going to find, we're going to be out there in the world, obviously exposing ourselves. We can't be a net zero on everything.
No,
you can't be perfect. But at the same time, like you can, use common sense. And one common theme that I see, no pun intended, from what you were saying is like the way you kind of came to these conclusions was common sense, common thinking. And I think most people would agree with you. And that's why it is common. And like, what is this food? This is not healthy. And things like that. And when you ask questions like that, I think you can say a rabbit hole, but also you just begin to make sense of what actually works and what actually doesn't. So I guess like on that note, like what did you find, if you were to recommend someone that wants to get healthy, because I know a lot of people, they don't know where to start. They, we're in a world where there's so many opinions. You go on social media and there's 100 different health gurus. There's the locked in supplements. There's like this
all
supplement,
kinds of
this
diets
product,
and,
this thing, what works? And like, where would you start if you, started from square one like you did at that point?
Yeah. And also I'll preface this by saying, obviously, like I am not a medical professional, like by no means, but I'm just a guy who has educated himself. And there's obviously, it's a field that is like infinite learning. You can't ever possibly know it all.
100%.
But yeah, dude, the funniest thing is like, I don't actually think that's a hard question. Like to me, the answer to that is quite simply like, it's gotta be a holistic approach. And so what does that mean? That means eating good food. So for me, and I made extensive lists, like that started out for myself, and then I started to be able to share them out to people who were asking for them. But like, to me, when it comes to food, like the easiest thing, without getting into like this diet over that diet, because I don't really care about that game. I think there's all kinds of great diets, but I think the only diet that ever actually works is the one you stay on.
Consistency.
You know what I mean? Like if it's the best diet, but it sucks and you hate your life and like you can't stay on it for more than a few months, it's not going to work. But it's a few main things. Would be number one, you gotta do your best to reduce ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
That's a very, very basic one. The evidence is overwhelming that there is a lot of correlation between heavy consumption of ultra processed food and serious long-term disease. Like that, and again, the thing about like the health space is like, there's a lot of people out there that will post shit that is completely not grounded in science. It's just not like, and it's, again, I know that then people will ask questions like, well, yeah, but these studies are, there's conflicts of interest, and yeah, like that happens. But at the end of the day, cutting out ultra processed food is a huge one. Right. And that really means anything frozen, anything pre-prepared, like all that garbage. Again, enjoy yourself once in a while, but like, just know there's a reason why those foods can sit out on a counter for fucking 5 months and not grow one speck of mold.
We've all seen the videos.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
We've all seen them.
Number two would be dramatically lowering your sugar intake. And again, it's crazy that even like for myself and Anastasia, who are, by all metrics, healthy people, not even remotely close to approaching overweight or like any kind of thing like that. And yet, when we did our blood tests, this was probably about 5-6 months ago, our fasting glucose was actually not quite what I was hoping. It was a little higher than I would hope. And it just goes to show that like, there's so much sugar in our diet that like a lot of people, they don't even realize that they actually are approaching pre-diabetes. Like that's a very real thing. And if you don't get it under control, it will ultimately progress. And once it's progressed beyond a certain level, it's very difficult to come back from that. Right. And so, and not to mention sugar, obviously, and, with weight gain and all these kinds of things. And then the only other thing I probably would say would be just eat real food.
Yeah.
That's what it is, whether you're vegetarian or animal based, like, again, there's all kinds of arguments there, but that I don't want to get into, but just eat real food. Yeah. That to me is just common sense. So those three things, I think if you do like just that with nutrition, like, and especially if you were eating a really shit diet before, like you will notice within a handful of months that you feel super different, right?
But consistency is key.
Consistency is key, but I do also think the key is that you can't strive for perfection. In my opinion, I think, I think that you gotta be okay with being 80-20, 90-10. If you're the kind of person who's really like anal about this shit and you want to be perfect, good for you. But like, it's more about the majority of the food you eat, right? But that's the first thing. Second thing is sleep. Again, you can have all your other health areas perfect, but if you sleep like 3 hours a day, you are not going to have good long-term health. You just won't. Again, the data is all there for that. Food, sleep. The third one's exercise, right? a lot of what I've read lately talks about, cardio is phenomenal and all these different things. But the thing that overwhelmingly is correlated with, huge reductions in all cause mortality long-term is resistance training.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta brunk. You gotta go hit the gym. Yeah.
No, there's no alternative.
No, there's no alternative.
Yeah.
It's just holding on to muscle. I've got my mom. It's so funny on a lifting program.
That's awesome.
It's jokes, but exercise. And then from there, I think these ones are maybe a little, so those are huge ones, right?
Yeah.
Sleep, nutrition,
like
exercise, non-negotiables. But there's some other ones that I think are critical too, like things like sun exposure.
Yeah.
Get out in the sun.
Vitamin
like
D.
people, the sun's been so demonized so wrongly. Like, yes, don't go in the sun for 5 hours and get burnt to a crisp. But like the sun has incredible health benefits. Spend time outside. I think things like saunas, and this is where you get into more, again,
the biohacking
stuff that I think is like the last 5% of like what's critical. Because again, if you sauna every day and go in the sun, but like you eat like shit and don't exercise, that's not going to cut it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And like what you said really aligns with what I believe too. And I think if you start there, you're giving yourself a good starting point.
Yeah.
And that's why, I'm huge on supplements.
Yep.
I'm a big believer in that extra 5%, like you mentioned. And one thing I say, like, with these, products that I launch, they're not like you take them and it's going to solve all your problems. I never claim that. And that's why when I made this brand, I made it for high performers that want a competitive edge. Because the genuine thing with high performers is usually they have those things dialed already. They have their sleep decent. They have their diet pretty good. They have these things already going pretty well and they want that competitive edge. And that's why I think that when it comes down, when you strip away a lot of the health things with, products, a lot of these, other companies will come out there, launch a health product and say it's kind of all in one. And, I think what you said is really candid. If you're not doing those non-negotiables, like you said, like all these products you're taking on top of that, some people want that one click, the Ozempic, the one pill. And the thing is, it's a myriad of things. But once you get your health in check, then you look at that 5%, and that's when you can really start getting locked in, no pun intended. But I definitely really feel that with you. And, I think that is something that a lot of people are going to resonate with because, I think there's so many opinions out there and you really dumbed it down for the audience. So yeah, I want to give that a shout out. We spoke about a lot of things on this podcast, but I wanted to leave this to the end because, obviously it changes the entire landscape of this podcast. And obviously when I started this podcast, I wanted it to be, the biggest, most successful podcast in the world. And I believe, I said it in the last episode, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Right.
And when you have two guys that live fast and also want to go far, that's a recipe for success. So I do want to talk about, how do you feel about being the newest co-host of the Living Fast podcast?
I'd be honored, brother. I'm fired up about that. And I'm not gonna lie, when you asked me to do that, I won't lie and say I had thought about it before. I love what you build here. Love what we're doing here. And it's exciting for me because I think, personally, like I've always loved to be able to meet new people and learn things about them. Like I even remember back like at school, I worked in kind of, different jobs at my athletic center. And like a long part of those shifts were just like sitting with one person for like 3-4 hours at a time. And I remember actually like loving those shifts a lot just because it's amazing what you can kind of learn from people and pull out of people. So yeah, brother. Hey, listen, I'm psyched to be here. I'm psyched to be able to properly call myself a co-host. And I think we're gonna have a great run.
100%. And I think most importantly, like why I started this podcast was giving value back to the audience and just, a little bit of a personal story. Like after that first episode, the amount of random people that would just come up to me and say, oh, Jake Perkins, Weston Living Fast podcast. Like everyone watch it. And not that I knew that would happen. Like I just launched it. Let's just provide value to the audience. And everyone loved it. And everyone loved the value we provided and the angle we took. And, I think that spoke I think when you're given that information, you can just do nothing or you can take action. And I'm someone that, thought about it a lot. And I had my friend, tell me, I think Jake would make a great co-host. And it's crazy that he says that because you said you were thinking about it. I was thinking about it as well. And then that third opinion that, doesn't even know you that well so far at that point in time, him saying that really solidified it for me. And, I think that it's going to be an absolute success, and I'm super excited. And I think you fit the brand right.
Man.
You're the ultimate high performer. You're definitely locked in. You're definitely living fast. And, you obviously know how it's done here at Living Fast. And I guess for the final question of this episode, how do you live life fast, Jake Perkins?
For sure. You know what? I'll actually end it on this. It's been something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's a quote, actually. And I don't know why it just like, you hear quotes all the time, and for whatever reason, this one spoke to me so much. I honestly can't even remember who the quote is. It was Nietzsche or something, but the quote is, they make the water muddy because they want you to think it's deep. And the meaning of it being, I'm realizing there's so much shit in life that seems so complicated, seems like it takes so much to like learn how to do this. And it's, in my opinion, very much not the case. Again, they make the water muddy because they want you to think it's deep, but it's not actually deep. And it's just a thing that I've been saying a lot because I think there's lots of folks who want to, start something or get into something or do something, but there's that fear of like, yeah, but there's so much I don't know. And it's like, there's actually not. I think shit's not as complicated as people make it. So that's been a big thing for me that I've just been saying over and over. And I think it applies to a lot of stuff. If there's something that, you're trying to go for, just know it's really likely not as far away as you think.
100%. Well, thank you guys for this episode. Again, we're presented by Locked In, and you're going to be seeing Jake a lot on this episode. On Living Fast, he is the newest co-host. Anyway, continue to live fast. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Right on.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.